All right, welcome to panel 11, questioning societal structure and individual choice. We will be saving all to the end.
I have a question. Why were we doing that?
Ask me that in about 45 minutes. Always razzing me. To start, we will go with Jeffrey Diller. Jeffrey has his BA in English and philosophy. He's currently pursuing his master's degree in English. He is also a vegan. Give it up for Jeff.
All right, so my paper is called A Critique of Speciesism and the Practices of the Meat Industry. And I'll just jump into it without any further ado. So, speciesism. In Animal Liberation, Peter Singer defines speciesism as a prejudice or attitude of bias in favor of the interests of members of one's own species and against those of members of other species. Singer associates speciesism with racism, sexism, and other exclusionary mindsets. And some related terms I use throughout the paper are anthropocentrism or human-centeredness and human chauvinism also. And so most humans, whether knowingly or otherwise, are theoretically speciesist, and the word theoretically is the key thing here, because theoretically maybe, but I think practicably speaking they are not. And so they wholly dissociate themselves from all non-humans, relegating non-humans to the realm of absolute alterity or otherness. And so again, like I said, practicably speaking, the position of speciesism, I say, is both unmanageable and untenable, as practices at least currently stand within the meat industry itself. And my premise, the meat industry operates on what I call ethical egotism or selfish interest, and not speciesism or human interest in general. Meat eating is a luxury, an addiction. According to Singer, today, the average American eats more than 200 pounds of red meat, poultry, and fish per year. In 1970, the average American ate 23 pounds less meat per year. So here we see a positive corollary. We see increased productivity means increased consumption. And in my analysis, I'm not necessarily challenging Singer's definition or assessment of speciesism. Instead, I aim to elucidate the fact that the US meat industry and its practices are in fact not speciesist. My argument is that the meat industry, and in particular the production of beef is what I'm looking at here today, is based on ethical egotism rather than speciesism. And my analysis goes in two parts. First, I look at some problematizations of the human-non-human binary. And the first one I look at is Jacques Derrida, his analysis of the category the animal. And the animal as a singular catch-all kind of category. The animal in the singular plural, as Derrida calls it, is a violent gesture of categorization, a violent gesture of exclusion. The classification of all different types of animals as plainly animal is a grave oversimplification and a radical reduction. So Derrida is basically deconstructing a structuralist perspective of language. And so I turn to Ferdinand de Saussure's course in general linguistics and to the word sign, his concept that the signifier, the sound image or the word, and signified the concept that comes to mind when that word is heard. And the animal clearly fails as a sign. Why? Because as signifier, animal signifies every living being under the sun, humans included. In this case, the signifier animal is overabundant and thus meaningless. It does not call to mind one concept, but a plurality of incommensurable concepts. And then I move to Peter Singer's analysis of the marginal cases of humanity, which are fetuses, infants, comatose patients, and the severely disabled. If the category human implies the highest degree of rationality, self-consciousness, and autonomy, then clearly many non-humans would be categorized as human, while the marginal cases would be more appropriately categorized as non-human. And speciesists, of course, might argue that this analysis is an equally violent type of gesture, but I don't think it is necessarily, because it aims at inclusion rather than exclusion. it doesn't want to dehumanize the marginal cases per se or advocate any kind of inhumane treatment towards them. Instead, it's aimed to humanize non-humans, and basically it shows how preferential treatment is given to our own species over another, and so it can be classified as an argument against speciesism. And the second part of the analysis moves away from the problematizations of the human-animal binary and goes to a problematization of speciesism itself by analyzing the damaging practices of the meat industry. And in my paper, there's an implicit hierarchy of ethics. At the top, I would put a true ethics of others that takes into consideration the environment, animals, and humans alike. And then below that, I would put speciesism, because it would entail some consideration for the environment and animals, as my paper will show as I go along. And then below that is ethical egotism. I think that's where we're at right now with the meat industry, that it is based on selfish interest, and it basically detracts from the overall welfare of the environment, animal welfare, and also human welfare in general. So yeah, analysis in the meat industry, I go over it in 3 parts. First, I look at the industry's misallocation and misuse of resources. Second, damage caused to the environment, deforestation, and mass water consumption. Third, the mega corporate farmer turns their cattle into carnivores and sometimes cannibals, and this leads to the spread of transmissible forms of spongiform encephalopathy. So the misallocation of resources. America produces 36 million cattle per year. According to the World Health Organization, and this is from 2001, the same number of people, 36 million, around the world died from malnourishment and diseases that attack the body when a person is undernourished. According to Singer, 13 pounds of grain are required to produce a single pound of beef. But even these figures are flattering to meat production, because a pound of meat contains much more water weight than that of grain. So in other words, when beef is produced, the return of calories and protein is far less than what was originally used to fatten the cattle in preparation for slaughter. And another statistic comes from Anna Sherritt. The article is called Vegetarian Children, or Raising Vegetarian Children. So about 40% of the world's grain harvest is fed to animals, and just half of this would be enough to feed the hungry planet. So according to these statistics, we could really effectively end worldwide human starvation. If we were speciesists, I think that would be an aim. But however, I believe capitalism in general, and here the meat industry in particular, is not concerned with human interests and welfare. Instead, it is concerned with profit and productivity. And it is based on, of course, ethical egotism rather than speciesism. So now the misuse of resources. We feed an exorbitant amount of grain to animals presumed to be less important than humans, while millions of humans around the world die from starvation. So cows are made to eat forage, such as grass or hay, and we feed them now, currently as it's being done, we feed them corn, wheat, and soy. As a result, they develop lactic acid in their rumens, and this creates gas and causes feedlot bloat, a condition so severe that cattle can actually suffocate from it. And normally, cows would die from feedlot bloat, but there is one way to keep them alive long enough. That's just keep pumping them full of antibiotics.